So, Yannis and Paris, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Emese. And before starting, we would like to express our sincere thanks to you and to the working group that for this invitation that gives us the chance to speak about our work. So, the constitution of folklore archives as the discipline of folklore itself.
Yes, okay.
Is related with the emergence of nation states. The Hellenic Folklore Research Center of the Academy of Athens, since its foundation in 1918, focused on collecting stories of various kinds, oral traditions, folk songs and folk tales, fables and late life stories in the framework of recording and documentation of popular culture. The center's archive contains a rich collection of holdings collected and added to since the late 19th century. It contains a great deal of ethnographic and folklore material in written form, both published and unpublished. It also holds musical recordings, interviews, photographs, film and video material that pertain to every aspect of folk culture regarding the material and spiritual life of the Greek people. The manuscript archive consists of 7,946 mostly unpublished manuscripts, which derive from fieldwork carried out by the center's research staff members, by external associates of the center, and by members of the public with a personal interest in Greek culture. Throughout the center's history, the research staff members recorded regional Greek popular culture through interviews, recordings, photographs, film, drawings, and participant observation. Our archive as a source was determined by its classificatory and taxonomic logic according to specific theoretical and methodological principles of that time. The center has a long tradition in collecting and archiving oral material through more or less fixed questionnaires for collecting the material and following a lematographic approach for its classification. Moreover, in the earlier era of Greek folklore, information was favored in expense of the socioeconomic and cultural context in which the practices, behaviors, performances, oral traditions, beliefs, and customs that were being described in the sources took place. Not to mention, of course, the source itself. Until the 70s, most of the collected oral material was written down by the researchers during their fieldwork and brought into the center's archive in the form of manuscripts that were later excerpted, indexed, and classified. Until this period, the audio recordings contained mainly folk music. The theoretical and methodological developments in the fields of folklore, ethnology, social anthropology, and oral history, in conjunction with the rapid spread of digital technologies, have influenced ethnographic field research regarding the methods of collection as well as the form of the material collected, that is, audiovisual material in analog or digital format. These changes affected the theoretical and methodological choices of the Hellenic Folklore Research Center's researchers, and finally, the center's research policies. In a critical approach, the recent interest in archives points out their role as producers of knowledge. Collection, classification, and archivization are neither neutral nor objective procedures. Not only are they determined by the theoretical thinking and the methodological tools of each era, but also by the needs of the present that are projected in the past with the look on the future. In this sense, the archive maintains a close relationship with power. In fact, classification and archivization determine the content of the archive and therefore what can be said about the past, both now and in the future. In this sense, the archive defines the experience of memory, who remembers why and how, and also the contents of the archive, and especially the policies of memory. Archives then could be perceived as the heritage of the societies that produce them, just as cultural heritage itself could be considered an archive. Both the rereading of the archives in order to reveal the multiple voices and the untold stories of the past, the interpretation of their uses and their contribution to present purposes and future challenges are some of the issues that concern the recent archival term. In the above considerations, we should also consider the changes that digital technology brings to the archives and broadly to digital humanities. This is not just a way to modernize formation, classification, and management of new archival material. It is indeed a much deeper change which may even affect the very meaning of the archive itself. It should not be overlooked, however, that institutionalized archives produce official narratives about the past and shape people's lives in the present, just as is the case with our archive concerning popular culture and tradition. In the Hellenic Folklore Research Center, in an effort that Ekaterini Polymerou Kamilaki, our former director, initiated and supervised, the first change was the digitization of the old handwritten sources and the creation of audiovisual archives which could receive both these digitized sources and the new material which nowadays is recorded directly in digital format. During the EU-funded project developing a national documentation center for popular culture 2004 to 2008, the manuscript archive, the archive of indexed and classified folklore material, the photographs and the analogical sound recordings have been digitized. This digitized material was entered in the Application System Center Configuration Manager in order to be archived and documented. Here you see the interface of that program. The transition to the digital age, in addition to the digitization, has emphasized the need to create modern taxonomic schemes for the documentation and management of the digitized material, which will respond to modern theoretical quests. For this purpose, an open and flexible electronic documentation format combining thematic domains and thesauri of terms was created. In view of the aforementioned theoretical and methodological changes, the critical approach to archives and the possibilities of interconnection offered by the new information technologies, two conditions must be met. The first concerns the need to reconstruct the archive and more specifically the databases that host the archival material. In this context, it is necessary to continue the effort that has already begun in the last 2 decades for the digital evolution of the archive. That means the transition of the SCCM into a new operational application compatible with modern developments in the information technology sector, which is already underway. At the same time, it is necessary to create databases that will host the multiple forms of documents, text, sound recording, films, photographs, etc., whether they relate to the existing material or the new one that is being directly recorded in digital format. The important issue in this action is to create the appropriate conditions for interconnectivity between these different forms of information, and also the creation of an overall image, a rich text for each recording, an image that will take into account the various materialities of the archival material, but also the researchers or collectors' approach, and even the informant, where possible, in an attempt to reconstruct the overall context of the ethnographic recording and to create new knowledge by asking new questions and making the correct connections in order to acquire the requisite information. Having a material that is in textual form, but also the latest material that is in digital audio and video form, the need arises for a database to host and document the audiovisual material. Looking for a solution, we experimented with StorySmarter, a free software created by the Center for Oral History and Digital Storytelling in Concordia, at Concordia University in Canada. Here you see some of the work we've done with our interviews in order to see how it works. However, it worked well, I must say. It suited us very well, but its dependence on a now defunct commercial program, Flash, led to its abandonment by its creators and our project to a dead end. However, the need for the creation of an application that will perform queries in both databases, the SCCM and what we will find, because now StorySmarter works only on our computers but not in a server. Queries that will not be affected by the different formats and metadata of the archive material is indispensable, but presents a technical challenge. In order to resolve it, we could benefit, of course, from the relevant experience of our Estonian colleagues who created the archival information system KIVIK.
Okay, in the context of the recent project, Hellenic National Documentation Network of the Untouchable Cultural Heritage, 2012 to 2015, under the direction of Katerina Kamilaki and Evangelos Karamanes, the film archive and the museum collection, numbering 1,200 objects, have been digitized and documented, and specialized database for legends and proverbs have been created. You can see here the interface of our website that has all these databases. The film archive comprises 82 films of about 8,500 meters of folklore material recorded on the 16mm film during the 60s and 1970s. Since the 1980s, research staff members have been using video cameras during fieldwork, and at present are also using digital cameras. As part of its ongoing program of reorganization and modernization, the center has embarked on converting its film material to digital form, thus making it more easily accessible. A start has been made with the 16mm films in the collection. In this context, we also proceeded with the scientific documentation of part of the film archive for its projection on the World Wide Web, based on a scheme we have developed, and which is a proposal for the documentation of the center's archive as a whole, but we're going to talk about it in detail below, just to have an image of the data that you can find for each film. In the framework of the same program, the repository of the publications and the annual of the Hellenic Folklore Research Center was modernized according to the modern IT standards with this space, and electronic documentation, Dublin core. Digitization continued with funds from the Academy of Athens and concerned the digitization of analog audio folklore material, about 330 hours, with songs and narratives, and the digitization of another 90,000 pages of manuscripts. We'll now examine the way we have reread the Hellenic Folklore Research Center's archive of popular legends to create a digital repository and a specialized online database within the project of Hellenic National Documentation Network we talked before. The archive of popular legends comprises, you can see an index card of this our archive. And as you can see, the archive of popular legends comprises 7,817 handwritten index cards, corresponding to 6,760 different entries. The legends included in the index cards derive from the indexing of Folklore Research Center manuscript archive, and also from the indexing of printed sources. Our archive of popular legends was initially constituted according to specific theoretical and methodological principles determined largely by the historical context in which it was created. This material was classified according to Nikolaos Politis categories as further developed by his successors in the Hellenic Folklore Research Center. This categorization comprises 44 different categories. Next to the categories expressing the folklore trends on that era, in the beginning of the 20th century, and we mean sky, earth and stars, dragons, nature sprites, gnomes, goblins, fairies, etc. We came across specific categories that serve to search and document the ideology of the continuity of Hellenism from ancient Greece and Byzantium up to modern Greece, with a special emphasis on orthodoxy. Some examples are the categories Greeks, giants and heroes, ancient buildings and ruins, ancient marbles, ancient gods and ancient heroes, Constantinople and Hagia Sophia, a specific topos in numerous Greek legends, Jesus, saints, churches and icons, etc. The classification of legends by Nikolaos Politis was based on criteria regarding their content, while their commentary and interpretation follow Politis' ideological assumptions. In this respect, the comparative approach mainly concerns the relationship of modern Greek folk culture with the ancient one, and to a lesser extent, its relationship with other cultures. Despite the efforts of his descendants to develop other schemes for classifying legends based on different theoretical assumptions, Politis' scheme remains the methodological model followed by the discipline of Greek folklore, a fact which, according to the same Greek scholar, is due to its alleged utility. The necessity for the creation of a specialized database for legends had long been emphasized by Marilena Papachristoforu, who has also made a relevant proposal for such a construction. Moreover, her proposals concerns the restructuring of the taxonomic system followed by a Hellenic Folklore Research Center for classifying legends. Specifically, alongside the system of Nikolaos Politis, she suggests the adoption of the proposal for an international index of traditional legends discussed in Budapest in 1963, together with a classification of legends based on related germs, contemporary legends, testimonies, experiential stories, humorous stories, belief, tales, superstitions, and rumors, in order to address the problems of classification already identified. So, in addition to the data concerning the archival documentation of each legend, She included in her proposal a group of fields related to the context of the recording, the link of the source to the archive, and a group of fields related to the content of the legend, its documentation, and its interpretive approach. When designing the popular legends database, we started Papachristophorous' proposal and included almost all the proposed documentation fields. However, taking into account that until now there is no integrated and universally accepted international classification system for legends, the difficulties and the criticism of such an attempt, we choose to shift our interest from the classification of legends to the analysis and documentation of their content in order to respond to the needs concerning the creation of a digital folklore database and broadly speaking, computational folkloristics. For this reason, we did not proceed with the adoption of any sort of classification, but only respecting our Folklore Research Center scientific tradition. We took into account the already applied classifications of Nikolaos Politis and one of his successor, Georgios Megas, in order to reflect the historical evolution of a documented legend followed in our archive. Our next aim was to enrich the existing documentation by exploiting all the information that could be found both on the old handwritten index cards and in the related manuscripts in which the legends are contained. Furthermore, besides enriching and restructuring the existing information, we tried to reread the data in order to reveal the silences of the past, mostly due to the previous classifications, research questions, and theoretical approaches that had ultimately transformed the existing archive of popular legend into a system of discursivity. First, additional documentation fields were added in order to enrich the information deriving from the existing index cards. Additionally, we added two more fields, subject headings and keywords. Subject headings and keywords are helpful not only in the context of the specialized database of popular legends, but also as a real thesaurus that will facilitate queries taking into account all the material available in our archive. Finally, we tried to connect the popular legends database with the Folklore Research Center archive as a whole by linking individual entries to the other section of our archive and women manuscripts, audiovisual recordings, etc. We believe that this contextualization contributes to a more comprehensive interpretation of legends and overcomes the drawbacks associated with germed database, such as the artificial division of oral culture and the inability to study the complexity of a given local culture. The need to contextualize information can be served by the capability of interconnections between different databases. To this aim, the content of certain documentation fields will be retrieved from the preconceived lists that have been developed for the SCCM, a choice that makes these fields compatible with the SCCM, thus facilitating interconnection.
So the fields of this database of popular legends can be in big categories are the following. The ones that concern the classification of already existing information. That is drawer number, sources, legend title, text, legend classification, according to Politis and Megas, recording place, recording year, and collector. More fields of documentation were added in order to enrich the information deriving from the existing the next one. Bye. That is the one slide, yes, and now we're in the second thing. We refer to details concerning the informant that are sometimes displayed on the index cards. If these details don't exist, we can usually retrieve them from the manuscript where the legend is found. So we have this information most of the times. That is, that you see the fields here: informant, informant age, informant educational level, informant gender, informal additional information. The next group is about the context of the recording, and here we have recording site, data collection settings, legend provenance, if this place does not necessarily coincide with the place of the recording due to internal migration. The next group of fields is about the performance. Until now, many Greek folklorists, though accepting that legends are part of oral tradition, treat them mainly as texts. Therefore, all those aspects that relate to their vocation as a communicative event are often left in the background, as we all know from our ethnographic experience. The study of their communicative dimension and the ways of their transmission, their performance, in other words, serve the following fields: performance description, occasion of performance, performer and performer gender. The next group of fields is about the textual analysis of the analysis of the text of the legends, and here we find the legend settings, the place of reference of the legends, the period of reference, characters and beings that are being referred to in the text, and of course the events. The text documentation is the next group, and here we find language, informants, cultural group that is being referred to in the legend, and of course the subject headings and keywords that Paris already talked about. And the last group of fields is about interconnectivity, and here we find bibliographic references and links to the digitized index cards, manuscript pages, and audiovisual archives that contain the specific legend. In the next two slides, you'll see how it looks like. So that's the interface when you enter the database. In the next one, here you see the what you see when you click to see a specific legend, and all the things that contain information are shown here. And in the next one, you see the same legend, but the fields are in the you see the metadata in Dublin core. The metadata of the whole repository were organized according to the Dublin core scheme, which is considered suitable for the description of digital sources. Knowing the key role of consistency and interoperability between similar databases shows that they are compatible and allow the exchange of metadata, we opted for this page. This page uses by default a qualified Dublin core-based metadata scheme. Dublin core is a widely accepted metadata standard because apart from the 15 predefined metadata terms, new terms can be added according to the user's special needs. This feature was exploited for the design of our database, something that had already happened with other similar databases, like the Dutch folktale database. Furthermore, in terms of compatibility, this space can ingest other hierarchical metadata schemes such as mark and modes, and complies with many standard protocols for access, ingest, and export of data. Finally, it uses an XML markup language, a uniform, flexible, and expandable option, which had already been used by several databases similar to ours. The above features made it possible to integrate the digital repository into Search Culture, that is the Greek aggregator for cultural heritage content that has been developed by the Greek National Documentation Center, and then from Search Culture to the Europeana, which is the EU digital platform for cultural heritage, as you all know. The technical issues arising from the different metadata formats of the databases and the different forms of classification and documentation of the individual archives, in combination with the changes in the theoretical and methodological approaches both to archives and to the discipline of folklore, pose the need to redefine the principles of archival classification and documentation of the ethnographic material in the Hellenic Folklore Research Center's archive. With this aim, our starting point was the taxonomic principles that have been developed by the Hellenic Folklore Research Center's researchers and other folklorists, taking into account that all indexing and classification methodologies are imposed from certain theoretical views and ideas. We attempted to combine the above mentioned with the classification principles of the Library of Congress, which treats social anthropology, ethnology, ethnography, folklore, and finally manners and customs as different categories, with the classificatory principles of the American Folklore Society ethnographic thesaurus, which further specify the classification of the Library of Congress in the field of ethnography. And finally, with Vasilis Misakos, he is a Greek folklorist, recent proposal for the classification of ethnographic and folklore material. In this way, we have tried to broaden the SCCM's existing taxonomic scheme concerning both the subject headings and keywords, as well as the inclusion of other types of evidence, audio and audiovisual sources, but also the exploitation of the developments in the field of the IT technologies. The basic categories in our classification scheme are material culture, social organization, belief, manners and customs, oral tradition, and art. Oral tradition does not exist as a basic subject heading in the Library of Congress classification system. However, it partly coincides with what they classify under the term folklore. Also, art does not exist as a basic subject heading in the Library of Congress classification system, but it is included in the American Folklore Society ethnographic thesaurus. Finally, economy is included in material culture and in social organization, following both the classification of the Library of Congress and most of the Greek approaches. So these 5 main subject headings are further divided as follows.
And we're going to see this division. First of all is material culture. You can see space which contains geomorphology, flora, fauna, organization of space, then inhabitation, dwelling, communal area, residential area, houses, sacred and secular buildings, public spaces, furniture and utensils, primary economic sector, agriculture, animal husbandry, fishery, techniques, professions, handicrafts, subcategories to be taken from a questionnaire from Imelos, our academic and Polymerou Kamelaki, the previous director of our research center. Movement, transport, migrations, nutrition, clothing and grooming. And then the second one has to do with the social organization and is administration, community, kinship, consanguinity, kinship by affinity, alternative forms of kinship, kinship systems such as clan, lineage, kin, family, family structure, marriage, gender roles, age roles, then organizations, collectivities, such as societies, associations, peer groups, age groups, gender groups, and then social stratification, professional organization, guilds, social strata, social groups, and finally, for this subject hidden, ethnocultural groups. We continue with the third one, beliefs, manners, and customs. First is life cycle, life curse, childhood, pregnancy, birth, confinement, childbirth, abandoned infants, baptism, child rearing, adolescence, youth, apprenticeship, rites of passage, adulthood, sexuality, marriage, old age, death, and then yearly cycle, customary law, religion, magic, superstitions, divination, astrology, meteorology, folk medicine, beliefs about time, beliefs about places, game and recreation, and then the fourth one, oral tradition, fairy tales, legends, songs, life stories, free narration, riddles, distic, couplet, spells, incantations, charms, tongue twisters, proverbs, wishes, curses, maledictions, humor stories, names, first names, surnames, nicknames, place names, toponyms, animal names, plant names. And the last one is about art, music, dance, theater, painting, artifacts. It's worth mentioning that our scheme contains novel subject hidden as public spaces, mobility, movement, transport, migrations, gender and age roles, peer and gender groups, social stratification, social strata, ethnocultural groups, abandoned infants, youth, apprenticeship, adulthood, sexuality, old age, games and recreation, life stories, free narration, and finally, artifacts. Cataloging systems, including those based on multiple subset headings, tend to be relatively general and incomplete. That being said, in addition to subject headings, keywords play a crucial role in the documentation of ethnographic material, allowing a more specific documentation and facilitating more accurate queries. At the same time, they offer greater interconnection capabilities of the information stored within the individual archive databases, as well as between the individual archives. Finally, it is a dynamic system of archival documentation that leaves the user freedom to fully document all aspects of each source and facilitates new approaches and interpretations of archival material both presently and in the future. However, we would suggest that a preconceived list of keywords should exist in order to reduce the possibility of typing errors and duplicate entries. While creating a list of possible keywords, we try to combine different organizational structure. First, that of the existing Hellenic Folklore Research Center's archive. Second, that of the World Wide Web. And third, former and recent theoretical approaches to social anthropology, ethnology, ethnography, and folklore. We attempted as far as possible to draw the Greek words that were used as subject headings and keywords from the thesaurus of Greek terms, which has been developed by the National Documentation Center of the National Hellenic Research Foundation, and also from the RIA GR Humanities Thesaurus, the digital arts, Daria is the infrastructure about digital humanities, and we have the Greek department. Due to the large volume of the manuscript archive, the analysis of documentation of its content is only possible using machine learning techniques. Given the fact that in the Legends database, the Legends text have been typed into the corresponding field and are therefore searchable, techniques for data mining, topic modeling, and multimodal network representation of folklore corpuses could be applied in the near future. Furthermore, electronic mapping through a GIS program would facilitate a more accurate distribution analysis of the data. So, besides the automatic documentation and analysis of the material of this specific database, this could also serve as a model for developing machine learning algorithms for the documentation of the overall manuscript archive. However, to make all the manuscript archive material machine readable, two more technical challenges must be addressed. While the most recent manuscripts are already in electronic form, the oldest ones are handwritten by different scribes. The first challenge, therefore, concerns the development of an optical character recognition software for manuscripts written in Greek. The second challenge is related to the development of an automatic transcription software of the recorded and videotaped oral interviews. The implementation of the project we described today could enable the interconnection of the Hellenic Folklore Research Center databases with corresponding international one. This fact would allow international cooperation between folklore archives and the carrying out of joint research projects focused on the comparative approach of specific topics. Thank you very much for hearing us, and that's all, folks.